Turning now to an exclusive up-close look at government efforts to crack down on the illegal trade of fentanyl, a drug that is known for being highly dangerous and deadly.
A CBS News crew followed federal agents yesterday as they raided a suspected fentanyl lab. Chief National Affairs and Justice correspondent Jeff Pegues has more on what they found.
Before the sun came up, Homeland Security agents gathered ready to raid a Tucson, Arizona home.
Starting to roll.
We were there as they moved in with the help of local police.
Just stay on this side of the marked unit.
Inside, they found 100 pounds of what they believe are precursor chemicals, or chemicals used to make fentanyl, a drug 50 times more potent than heroin. It's been flooding cities across the country and blamed for thousands of deaths a year. Why is it so hard to stop the distribution?
Because there's so many different ways that it can be smuggled into the United States, right? It's coming in through 18-wheelers, it's coming in through passenger vehicles, it's coming in through people walking across the border.
According to investigators, China is one of the primary suppliers for these precursor chemicals for fentanyl. And look what's written on this box. But it's harder to track because it's being shipped in smaller amounts. How does that pose problems for law enforcement?
They're not going to raise as much suspicion if they're coming in smaller shipments versus a large bulk shipment.
Last year, law enforcement seized more than 50 million fentanyl-laced pills and over 10,000 pounds of fentanyl powder. That's enough to kill every American.
I don't believe that they're doing everything that they can.
Misty Little's 26-year-old daughter Cheyenne died after swallowing a pill that she didn't know was laced with fentanyl.
I want people to know that Cheyenne was a vibrant young woman that had her whole entire future ahead of her. You know, one bad decision she shouldn't have lost her life over. I want people to know that her life mattered.
Homeland Security and Justice reporter Nicole Sganga is here in studio with us now to talk more about this growing crisis. Good to see you.
Good to be here.
So let's talk about this. Just how prevalent and just how severe is this crisis in this country at this point?
More than 70,000 deaths from synthetic opioids in 2021. And just to give our viewers a sense, that's the most recent data we have from the CDC. That is more deaths than U.S. personnel killed in the wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Vietnam combined. And so this is, a very serious epidemic. And between the years of 2019, 2021, as we first saw the COVID pandemic pick up, fentanyl deaths doubled in the United States. Now, much like the pandemic, it sort of slices through socioeconomics, but of course disproportionately impacts communities of color and marginalized communities. It's also important to point out that trafficking of drugs within the United States was exacerbated by the pandemic. When we saw the shutdown of cross-border travel at ports of entry, smugglers were presented with a few options. Do we take more trips into the U.S.? Do we hire more smugglers? Or do we rely on a drug that is more potent? And fentanyl is 50 times more potent than opioids, heroin. And so, for that reason, we see this easier to conceal drug flowing over the U.S.-Mexico borders. It skyrockets during the pandemic.
Now, this story was about a possible fentanyl lab here in the United States. But does this drug typically come from elsewhere? Where's it coming from? How's it getting here?
Yeah, and so historically, what we had seen sort of at the beginning of the opioid epidemic was fentanyl flowing in through China. Now we're seeing, law enforcement trying to curb what is called, fentanyl precursors, what Jeff Pegues was talking about there, some of the ingredients, the building blocks used to produce fentanyl coming in from China, but the Mexican cartels and transnational organizations primarily based in, Latin America and Mexico are primarily responsible now for much of the opioids, much of the fentanyl we're seeing coming across our borders. And, again, just to give you a sense of how much we have seen, the DEA has seized, I think Jeff mentioned it there, 50 million pills in 2022. That is enough to kill every single American. And a lot of people would be surprised to know that they're not finding these drugs in the middle of the desert. We talk about the, influx of migrants coming across the U.S.-Mexico border. That's not what we're talking about here. 85% of this fentanyl is found at legal ports of entry. And that is because it is so easy to conceal. And that is why CBP is now, doubling efforts for non-intrusive scanning technology to really catch criminals that are crossing through right before their eyes.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a disturbing development. Nicole, thank you very much for your reporting. It's good to have you in studio.
Thank you.
Yeah.